In the unforgiving skies above Syria, where mountains pierce the clouds like jagged teeth, a single F-22 Raptor streaks through the darkness. The pilot's hands are steady on the controls, but her heart pounds with the weight of impossible choices. Below, innocent families sleep unaware that their lives hang in the balance. Above, enemy missiles reach toward her like deadly fingers, seeking to claim another angel from the sky. This is the moment when everything changes, when the past collides with the present, when a broken soul must choose between the safety of hiding and the courage to fly again. In the cockpit, Lieutenant Colonel Jessica Angel Thompson faces not just enemy fire, but the ghosts of a mission that went terribly wrong 2 years ago, the memory of a wingman's final words, and the crushing weight of survivors' guilt. But tonight is different. Tonight, she's not just fighting for survival, she's fighting for redemption, for the chance to prove that angels don't quit, they just find new ways to fly, for the opportunity to honor a fallen friend by protecting the innocent, no matter the cost. What transforms an ordinary person into a hero? What drives someone to risk everything for strangers they'll never meet? And when trauma threatens to ground us forever, how do we find the courage to soar again? This is Angel's story, a tale of loss and redemption, of friendship forged in fire, and of the unbreakable bond between those who serve. It's about discovering that our greatest strength often emerges from our deepest wounds, and that sometimes the most important battles are fought not against external enemies, but against the demons within ourselves. Welcome to this journey of courage and redemption. We'd love to know, where are you joining us from today? Whether you're watching from a military base, your hometown, or somewhere far from home, you're part of a community that values service, sacrifice, and the stories that honor our heroes. And here's a question for you. What draws you to stories about military courage and aviation? Is it the technical precision of fighter aircraft, the brotherhood forged in service, or the timeless appeal of ordinary people doing extraordinary things when duty calls? Share your thoughts below. We read every comment and love connecting with fellow admirers of those who serve. Now let's take flight with Angel and discover what it truly means to find your wings again. The desert sun cast long shadows across the cracked asphalt of Highway 95 as the first customers of the day pushed through the glass doors of the Desert Rose Diner. The bell above the entrance chimed a familiar tune that had welcomed travelers and locals alike since 1973. Inside, the aroma of fresh coffee and bacon filled the air, mixing with the soft hum of morning conversations and the distant rumble of military aircraft from Nellis Air Force Base. Jessica Thompson moved between the red vinyl booths with practiced efficiency, her ponytail swaying as she refilled coffee cups and took orders. To the regulars, she was simply Jess, the quiet waitress who remembered how everyone liked their eggs and never complained about double shifts. Her white uniform shirt was always pressed, her black slacks spotless, and her smile polite but distant. "More coffee, Mr. Henderson?" she asked the elderly veteran in booth 3, his weathered hands wrapped around a ceramic mug decorated with faded fighter jets. "You're an angel, Jess," he replied, his eyes crinkling with genuine warmth. "Don't know what this place would do without you." Jessica's smile faltered for just a moment, so brief that Henderson didn't notice, but she recovered quickly, topping off his cup before moving to the next table. The word angel always hit differently than intended. The morning rush continued its predictable rhythm until the bell chimed again, announcing the arrival of 3 men in crisp military uniforms. Colonel Richard Stevens led the group, his chest adorned with ribbons that spoke of administrative achievements rather than combat valor. His companions, a major and a captain, followed respectfully behind as he surveyed the diner with obvious disdain. "This place will have to do," Stevens announced loudly enough for half the restaurant to hear. "Though I suppose we can't expect much from civilian establishments." Jessica approached their table with menus, her posture unconsciously straightening. "Good morning, gentlemen. Welcome to Desert Rose Diner." Stevens barely glanced at her. "Coffee, black, and make it quick. We have important military business to discuss." "Of course, sir." Jessica's voice remained steady, professional. As she poured their coffee, Stevens continued his conversation about base logistics, his voice carrying the arrogance of someone who had never seen real combat. When Jessica returned with their breakfast orders 20 minutes later, Stevens was in the middle of a story about his latest promotion. "Excuse me," Jessica said quietly, balancing 3 plates. "Your orders are ready." Stevens looked up with irritation. Can't you see we're having an important conversation? Just put the food down and leave us alone. Of course, sir, I apologize. But as Jessica set down the plates, Stevens suddenly stood, causing her to step back quickly. The movement sent his coffee cup tumbling, the hot liquid splashing across the table and onto his uniform. "You clumsy fool," Stevens roared, jumping to his feet. "Look what you've done." The entire diner fell silent. Jessica grabbed napkins, trying to help clean the mess. "I'm so sorry, sir. Let me—" "Don't touch me." Stevens shoved her hand away. "Do you have any idea who I am? I'm a United States Air Force colonel, and you're just a waitress who can't even serve coffee properly." Jessica stood frozen, napkins still in her trembling hands. Around the diner, other customers watched in uncomfortable silence. Henderson started to rise from his booth, but Jessica caught his eye and shook her head slightly. "You're right, sir," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just a waitress." Stevens straightened his uniform jacket with sharp, angry movements. "That's right. And don't you forget it. People like you could never understand what real service means." The hot coffee had splashed onto Jessica's forearm during the incident, leaving an angry red mark that she tried to hide beneath her sleeve. But as Stevens continued his tirade, something flickered in her green eyes, a flash of steel that spoke of depths he could never imagine. The burn on Jessica's forearm throbbed as she cleaned tables in the aftermath of Colonel Stevens's departure. Maggie O'Brien emerged from behind the counter, her Irish accent thick with concern. "Let me see that arm, love," Maggie insisted, gently rolling up Jessica's sleeve to examine the red welt. "That pompous fool should be ashamed of himself." "It's nothing, Maggie, really." Jessica pulled her sleeve back down, but not before Maggie noticed how her hands shook slightly. "Nothing. My foot. 23 years I've been married to military men, and I know the difference between a real soldier and a desk jockey." Maggie's blue eyes flashed with anger. "That Stevens wouldn't last 5 minutes in real combat." Jessica said nothing, but something in her expression made Maggie study her more carefully. There was something about the way Jess carried herself, the perfect posture, the way her eyes constantly scanned the room, the precision of her movements. Maggie had seen it before in her late husband and his friends. The lunch rush began with the arrival of a group of young airmen from Nellis. They took the large corner booth, their flight suits bearing the patches of the 422nd Test and Evaluation Squadron. Leading them was Master Sergeant Tom Williams, an imposing African-American man whose weathered face spoke of years in service. "Afternoon, Jess," Williams called out with a warm smile. "The usual for my crew?" "Of course, Sergeant Williams." Jessica approached with her notepad, genuinely pleased to see the group. Unlike Stevens, these men treated everyone with respect. Among the younger airmen was Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, barely 24 but already showing the confidence of a skilled pilot. She was animatedly discussing their morning training exercise. "The new F-22 modifications are incredible," Martinez said excitedly. "The avionics package responds like it's reading your mind, though I still can't believe some of the stories about the pilots who flew the early models in combat." Jessica paused while taking their orders, her pen hovering over the notepad. "Speaking of legends," said Airman First Class Johnson, "did you guys hear about that pilot they called Angel, the one who supposedly saved an entire refugee convoy in Syria?" Williams glanced up sharply. "Where'd you hear that name, son?" "My instructor mentioned it during our mission briefing, said she was the best F-22 pilot the Air Force ever produced. Flew missions that were supposed to be impossible." Johnson's voice carried the awe of someone discussing a mythical figure. Jessica's grip tightened on her pen. The familiar sound of jet engines overhead seemed suddenly louder, more threatening. She could feel her heart rate increasing, the telltale signs of an approaching panic attack. "They say she disappeared after some classified mission went wrong," Martinez added. "Probably transferred to some black ops unit or something." "That's enough," Williams said firmly, noticing Jessica's pale complexion. "Some stories are better left alone." But the damage was done. Jessica's mind was already spiraling backward, pulled into memories she fought daily to suppress. The roar of engines became the screech of incoming missiles. The cheerful chatter of the young pilots transformed into Hawk's voice over the radio. "Angel, we've got multiple bogies inbound. Stay with me, partner." Miss, are you okay?" Martinez's concerned voice cut through the flashback. Jessica blinked, realizing she was standing frozen beside their table, her notepad fallen to the floor. All eyes were on her, worry evident on their faces. "I'm sorry," she managed, bending to retrieve her notepad. "Just tired." Long shift. Williams studied her with the keen eye of a veteran who had seen too many soldiers struggling with invisible wounds. Something about her reaction troubled him deeply. "No problem at all," he said gently. "Take your time." As Jessica walked away to place their orders, Williams watched her carefully. The way she moved, the military precision even in distress, the haunted look in her eyes when they mentioned combat pilots, it all seemed familiar somehow. From the kitchen came the sudden crash of metal on metal as a pot fell, followed by the sharp hiss of steam. The sound cut through the diner like a gunshot. Jessica dropped her tray. 2 years earlier, Syrian airspace, 0347 hours. The pre-dawn darkness stretched endlessly below, as 2 F-22 Raptors cut through the sky like silver ghosts. Lieutenant Colonel Jessica Angel Thompson adjusted her grip on the flight controls, her eyes scanning the heads-up display with practiced precision. "Angel, this is Hawk," came the familiar voice of Captain Mike Rodriguez through her headset. "Target zone is 12 clicks out. You seeing what I'm seeing on thermal?" Jessica's radar painted a grim picture. Below them, a convoy of refugee vehicles was trapped in a narrow mountain pass, surrounded by hostile forces. Intelligence had indicated a small militia group, but the heat signatures told a different story. "Confirmed, Hawk. Count at least 40 tangos, possibly more." Jessica's voice remained steady despite the odds. "Command, this is Angel Flight. We have a significant force multiplier situation." The radio crackled with static before responding. "Angel Flight, you are cleared to engage. Protect those civilians at all costs." "Copy that, Command." Jessica banked left, positioning for their attack run. "Hawk, we go in fast and low. Hit the armor first, then—" The missile warning alarm screamed through her cockpit. "Multiple contacts, surface to air, already in flight. Angel, brake right now." Hawk's voice cut through the chaos. Jessica threw her aircraft into a violent evasive maneuver, G-forces crushing her into her seat. Below, she could see muzzle flashes lighting up the mountainside like deadly fireworks. The refugees were caught in the crossfire, their vehicles burning. "I've got tone on the launcher," Hawk reported, his voice tight with concentration. "Going in." "Negative, Hawk, too much ground fire." But Mike Rodriguez had already committed to his attack run. Jessica watched in horror as tracer rounds reached up toward his aircraft like grasping fingers. His first missile found its target, eliminating the primary SAM site in a brilliant explosion. "Good hit, Hawk. Now get out of there." "Can't do it, Angel. There's another launcher and those civilians—" His voice was calm, resigned. "You know what we have to do." Jessica's blood ran cold. She knew that tone. She had heard it before from pilots who had made their final decision. "Mike, don't you dare—" "Tell Maria I love her," Hawk said quietly. "And Angel, you keep flying, promise me." His F-22 dove straight into the second missile site, his remaining ordnance detonating in a fireball that lit up the entire valley. The explosion took out the launcher and cleared an escape route for the refugees, but Jessica's wingman was gone. "Hawk! Hawk, respond!" Jessica's voice cracked as she called out to empty air. More missiles streaked upward. One caught her aircraft's left engine, sending shrapnel through the fuselage. Warning lights flooded her cockpit as the Raptor began its death spiral toward the rocky terrain below. "Mayday, Mayday, Angel is going down!" The ejection sequence felt like being hit by a freight train. The last thing she remembered was the ground rushing up to meet her, and the sound of her parachute tearing on jagged rocks. Present day, Desert Rose Diner. Jessica's eyes snapped open. She was sitting on the cold tile floor of the diner's restroom, her back against the wall, breathing hard. The familiar weight of panic pressed against her chest like a physical force. The door opened cautiously, and Dr. James Mitchell peered inside. His gentle face showed concern but no surprise. This was not their first emergency session. "Jessica, it's James. Can you hear me?" She nodded, not trusting her voice yet. "Doctor, Mitchell had been treating her PTSD for 8 months, ever since she had finally admitted she needed help. Was it the sounds again? The engines? They were talking about—" Jessica's voice came out as a whisper. "About Angel. About missions that went wrong." Dr. Mitchell sat down beside her on the floor, his presence calm and reassuring. "The young pilots out there? They think it's all glory and heroism." Jessica wiped tears from her cheeks. "They don't know what it costs. Tell me about Mike again." Jessica closed her eyes. "He saved 200 civilians that night. Women, children, families just trying to escape the war. And I couldn't save him. You survived for a reason, Jessica. Mike made his choice so you could make yours. I can't fly anymore, James. The admission came out broken, defeated. Every time I even think about getting in a cockpit, I see his plane going down. I hear him saying goodbye. Dr. Mitchell was quiet for a long moment. Recovery isn't linear. Some days will be harder than others. Those kids out there, they look at pilots like we're superheroes. They don't understand that heroes fall too, and when they do, they fall hard. Through the thin restroom door, they could hear the muffled conversations of the lunch crowd, the clink of silverware, the ordinary sounds of people living ordinary lives. Jessica envied them their simplicity. "I used to be someone," she whispered. "Now I'm just a waitress who can't even serve coffee without having a breakdown." "You're still someone, Jessica. You're still the woman who flew impossible missions and saved countless lives. That doesn't disappear because you're struggling." Jessica looked at her hands. Hands that had once controlled one of the most sophisticated aircraft ever built, now trembling as they held a coffee pot. "I don't know how to be anything else." The afternoon sun streamed through the Desert Rose Diner's windows as Jessica returned to her shift, her composure carefully rebuilt after the session with Dr. Mitchell. The lunch crowd had thinned, leaving only a few regulars and the group of airmen from Nellis still occupying the corner booth. 8-year-old Tommy Chen sat at the counter, swinging his legs as he worked on homework, while his grandmother, Mrs. Chen, finished her shift in the kitchen. The boy was a frequent visitor. His father had been killed in Afghanistan 3 years ago, and his grandmother worked part-time to help make ends meet. "Miss Jess," Tommy called out excitedly, "look what I drew." Jessica smiled genuinely for the first time that day as she examined his crayon drawing of fighter jets soaring through blue skies. "That's wonderful, Tommy. Are those F-22s? "Uh-huh. My dad flew those before he became an angel." Tommy's innocent words hit Jessica like a physical blow, but she managed to keep her expression steady. "I'm sure he was very brave." From the kitchen came the sound of Mrs. Chen preparing for the dinner prep. The old gas lines in the building had been acting up lately, and Maggie had been promising to call a repair technician for weeks. Master Sergeant Williams approached the counter to pay his check, studying Jessica with the careful attention of a career military man. Something about her reactions earlier had triggered his instincts. "You seem to know a lot about aircraft," he said casually. Jessica's hand paused while wiping down the counter. "I watch a lot of documentaries. Documentaries don't usually teach you the difference between an F-22 and an F-35 avionics package." Before Jessica could respond, a sharp hissing sound came from the kitchen, followed by Mrs. Chen's alarmed voice calling out in Mandarin. The acrid smell of gas began to fill the air. "Everyone out!" Maggie shouted from behind the counter. "Gas leak!" The diner erupted into controlled chaos as customers began filing toward the exits. But Tommy, curious and unaware of the danger, had wandered into the kitchen to find his grandmother. A loud crash echoed from the back as a heavy industrial mixer, loosened by the building's settling foundation, toppled over. "Tommy!" Mrs. Chen screamed. Jessica didn't think. She reacted with the instincts of someone trained for emergency situations. While others hesitated, she vaulted over the counter and sprinted toward the kitchen, her movements suddenly displaying a fluid precision that had nothing to do with waitressing. The kitchen was filling with gas fumes, and Tommy was trapped beneath the fallen mixer, conscious but unable to move. Mrs. Chen was trying frantically to lift the heavy equipment, but it was far too heavy for the elderly woman. "Mrs. Chen, get out now," Jessica ordered, with an authority that made the older woman obey without question. Jessica assessed the situation with tactical efficiency. The mixer weighed at least 300 pounds, but it was positioned in a way that created a fulcrum point. She grabbed a metal spatula from the prep station and wedged it under the machine, using a nearby prep table as leverage. "Tommy, when I lift this, you crawl out toward me. Don't go the other way. There's broken glass." The boy nodded, tears streaming down his face but trusting her completely. Jessica threw her full weight against the improvised lever. The mixer shifted just enough for Tommy to squeeze out, but the effort tore her uniform shirt from shoulder to elbow. As she helped Tommy to his feet, guiding him quickly toward the exit, Williams caught a glimpse of her exposed back. The scars were unmistakable to anyone who had seen them before, the distinctive pattern of burns and surgical marks left by an emergency ejection sequence. But it was the tattoo that made Williams' breath catch in his throat, a pair of pilot's wings with "Hawk, never forgotten" inscribed below them. Outside in the parking lot, Paramedics checked Tommy for injuries while the fire department vented the building. Jessica sat on the bumper of an ambulance, allowing an EMT to clean a cut on her arm where broken glass had caught her. Williams approached slowly, his mind racing. The scars, the tattoo, the way she had moved in the emergency, it all pointed to an impossible conclusion. That was some quick thinking in there, he said carefully. Anyone would have done the same. Jessica kept her eyes focused on the EMT's work. Not everyone would have known to use leverage like that, or moved with that kind of precision under pressure. Jessica finally looked up at him, and Williams saw something in her eyes that confirmed his growing suspicion, the look of someone who had seen combat, who had made life-and-death decisions in the space of heartbeats. "You're military," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. "Was," Jessica replied after a long pause. Williams glanced around to make sure they couldn't be overheard, then leaned closer. "Those scars on your back, I've seen marks like that before. Emergency ejection, high-altitude bailout." Jessica's entire body went rigid. "I don't know what you're talking about." But Williams had caught sight of something else when her shirt tore, a small tattoo on her shoulder blade that made his heart race. He had heard the stories, the whispered legends passed down through pilot training programs. "Angel?" he whispered, so quietly that only she could hear. Jessica's face went white as she stared at the man who had just spoken a name she thought was buried forever. The Desert Rose Diner remained closed for the evening while the gas company completed their safety inspection. Jessica sat alone in her small apartment above the building, staring at the torn uniform shirt in her hands. The fabric told the story she had tried so hard to hide, ripped seams that had exposed scars she kept covered, secrets she thought were buried. A soft knock at her door made her freeze. Through the peephole, she saw Master Sergeant Williams standing in the hallway, his expression serious but not threatening. "I know you're in there," he said quietly. "We need to talk." Jessica considered ignoring him, but something in his tone suggested he wouldn't simply go away. She opened the door but kept the chain lock engaged. "I told you, I don't know what you're talking about." Williams held up his hands in a peaceful gesture. "Ma'am, I've been in the Air Force for 27 years. I've seen a lot of pilots, and I've heard a lot of stories, but I've only seen scars like yours on one other person, and he didn't survive his ejection." Jessica's resolve wavered. "What do you want?" "5 minutes. That's all. If I'm wrong, I'll never bother you again." Against her better judgment, Jessica unhooked the chain and stepped aside. Williams entered the sparse apartment, his eyes taking in the military precision of the space. Everything in its place, no clutter. A single framed photo turned face down on the nightstand. "I served at Langley from 2018 to 21, Williams began. "Maintenance chief for the 427th Fighter Squadron. We had a pilot there, best I ever saw. They called her Angel because she could pull off miracles in the sky." Jessica remained silent, but Williams noticed her hands were trembling. This pilot, she had a reputation, flew missions that should have been impossible, saved more lives than anyone could count, had a wingman named Rodriguez. Everyone called him Hawk. At the mention of Mike's call sign, Jessica's composure cracked. "Stop." She disappeared after a classified mission went wrong. Word was her wingman died, and she was presumed KIA, but some of us wondered if maybe she survived and just couldn't come back to flying. Williams reached into his wallet and pulled out a faded photograph, a group shot of pilots and maintenance crew standing in front of an F-22. In the center stood a younger Jessica in full flight gear, her arm around Mike Rodriguez's shoulders. "I kept this picture because that pilot saved my nephew's unit in Syria. 30 Marines who would have died if she hadn't provided air support during their extraction." Jessica stared at the photograph, memories flooding back. She remembered that day, the camaraderie, the sense of purpose, the feeling that she was exactly where she belonged. "That was a long time ago," she whispered. "Not so long that those scars have faded, or that tattoo on your shoulder." Williams's voice was gentle, but insistent. "You're Lieutenant Colonel Jessica Thompson. Call sign Angel." The words hung in the air between them like a confession. Jessica sank into a chair, the weight of her hidden identity finally too much to bear. "How long have you known?" "I suspected when you talked about aircraft specifications earlier. I was almost certain when I saw how you handled the emergency, but when I saw those scars and that tattoo..." William sat across from her. "Mum, those kids at the base, they tell stories about you. You're a legend to them." "I'm not a legend. I'm a failure who got her wingman killed." From what I heard, Captain Rodriguez made his choice. He died saving civilians. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. He died because I couldn't complete the mission fast enough, because I wasn't good enough. That's survivor's guilt talking, not facts. A car door slammed outside, followed by footsteps on the external stairs. Williams moved to the window and peered through the blinds. "Ma'am, we've got company. Black sedan, government plates." Jessica's blood ran cold. "How many people did you tell?" "Nobody, I swear, but—" Williams paused, understanding dawning on his face. "I made some calls this afternoon, asked some old contacts about what happened to Angel. I thought I was being discreet." The footsteps stopped outside Jessica's door. 3 measured knocks followed, the kind of knock that suggested official business. "Colonel Thompson?" The voice was female, authoritative, and achingly familiar. "It's General Hayes. I think it's time we talked." Jessica closed her eyes, recognizing the voice of her former commanding officer. Patricia Hayes had been her mentor, the woman who had guided her career and believed in her potential. The last person Jessica had spoken to before disappearing into civilian life. "She was your CO," Williams said, reading Jessica's expression. "She was more than that. She was like a mother to me." Jessica stood slowly, smoothing down her civilian clothes. "And I've been hiding from her for 2 years. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. "Colonel, I know you're in there. Master Sergeant Williams' inquiries triggered some flags in the system. We need to discuss why someone is asking questions about a pilot who's supposed to be dead." Jessica looked at Williams, who had the grace to appear embarrassed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I never meant to—" "It's not your fault." Jessica moved toward the door, her hand hovering over the deadbolt. "I always knew this day would come." She opened the door to find General Patricia Hayes standing in the hallway, looking exactly as Jessica remembered. Steel gray hair in a perfect bun, uniform immaculate, eyes that missed nothing. Behind her stood 2 men in civilian clothes who were obviously security. "Hello, Angel," Hayes said softly. "You look like hell." Despite everything, Jessica almost smiled. "Hello, General. You look exactly the same. We need to talk, all of us." Hayes glanced at Williams. "Sergeant, you've stumbled into something classified. Are you prepared to hear things that might change your life?" Williams straightened to attention. "Yes, ma'am." Hayes nodded and stepped into the apartment, her security detail remaining outside. "Good, because your country needs Angel to fly again." General Hayes moved through Jessica's apartment with the measured steps of someone accustomed to command. She gestured for Williams to close the door before turning her full attention to the woman who had once been her most promising officer. 2 years, Jessica. 2 years of wondering if you were alive, dead, or just broken beyond repair. Hayes's voice carried disappointment rather than anger. "Do you have any idea what your disappearance did to morale, to the program?" Jessica remained standing by the window, her arms crossed defensively. "I left a resignation letter that cited personal reasons and gave no forwarding address. Your psychologist reports were classified, your medical records sealed. For all practical purposes, Angel simply vanished." Williams shifted uncomfortably, clearly out of his depth in this reunion between superior officers. Hayes noticed his discomfort and addressed him directly. "Sergeant, what I'm about to share with you is classified at the highest levels. Are you prepared for that responsibility?" "Yes, ma'am." Hayes opened a tablet and placed it on Jessica's small dining table. The screen displayed satellite imagery of what appeared to be a desert compound, with several buildings and vehicle movements clearly visible. 3 days ago, our intelligence services intercepted communications about a coordinated terrorist attack planned for next week. Multiple targets, multiple cities. The weapon of choice is a new type of chemical agent, something we've never seen before. Jessica found herself drawn to the images, despite her reluctance. Old habits died hard, and she couldn't help but analyze the tactical situation displayed on the screen. "The compound is located in a mountainous region of northern Syria," Hayes continued, "heavily defended, surrounded by civilian populations that the terrorists are using as human shields. Any conventional assault would result in massive civilian casualties. Send in special forces," Jessica said without looking up from the tablet, "or use drones." "We tried. 3 drone missions have failed. They have some kind of advanced jamming technology, and the terrain makes a ground assault nearly impossible. The approach corridors are too narrow, too well defended." Hayes swiped to the next image, showing detailed topographical maps with flight paths marked in red. This mission requires a pilot with very specific skills, someone who can fly low-altitude penetration missions in mountainous terrain, navigate electronic countermeasures, and execute precision strikes in close proximity to civilian areas. Jessica's hands clenched into fists. There are other pilots, not with your experience, not with your success rate in exactly this type of mission. Hayes' voice softened. Jessica, you're the only pilot we have who successfully completed 7 similar missions without civilian casualties. Williams studied the flight paths on the screen, his maintenance experience allowing him to understand the technical challenges. Ma'am, those approach angles, that's barely possible even in perfect conditions. Exactly, which is why we need Angel. Jessica finally looked up from the tablet, her face pale. I can't fly anymore, General. I've tried. Every time I get near a cockpit, I have panic attacks. I see Mike's plane going down, I hear him on the radio. I know about the PTSD, I know about Dr. Mitchell's treatment program. Hayes pulled up another file on the tablet. I also know that you've been making progress. Your last evaluation showed significant improvement. Improvement doesn't mean I'm ready for combat. Hayes swiped to a new set of images. Photographs of children in schools, families in parks, ordinary people living ordinary lives. These are the projected targets for the chemical attack. Schools in Denver, shopping centers in Phoenix, a military family housing complex at Nellis Air Force Base. Jessica's breath caught. Nellis, the base where your young friend Tommy Chen lives with his grandmother, where Sergeant Williams' daughter attends the base elementary school, where 3,000 military families call home. The room fell silent, except for the distant hum of traffic outside. Jessica stared at the photographs, her mind automatically calculating response times, evacuation procedures, casualty estimates. How long do we have? She asked quietly. Intelligence suggests the attack is planned for next Tuesday. That gives us 6 days to plan and execute a preemptive strike. Williams cleared his throat. General, if I may, what exactly would this mission involve? Hayes turned to a tactical briefing slide. Single aircraft insertion, low-altitude penetration through mountainous terrain, precision strike on the chemical weapons facility, and extraction under heavy fire. Estimated mission duration, 4 hours. Estimated survival probability, and she paused, meeting Jessica's eyes. 60%. Jessica closed her eyes, and suddenly she could hear Mike's voice as clearly as if he were standing beside her. An angel's job is to protect the innocent, Jess, no matter what it costs. I need time to think. We don't have time, Hayes said firmly. Every hour we delay increases the risk of civilian casualties. I need an answer now. Jessica walked to her nightstand and picked up the framed photograph she kept face down. That showed her and Mike in their flight suits, arms around each other's shoulders, both grinning at the camera after a successful mission. If I do this, she said slowly, I have conditions. Hayes nodded. Name them. I choose my own support team. I want full mission autonomy once we're airborne. And if I don't make it back, Jessica's voice caught, I want Tommy Chen and his grandmother taken care of. Full military benefits, education fund, everything. Done. Jessica set the photograph back on the nightstand, this time facing up. Mike's smile seemed to encourage her, reminding her of the promise she had made to keep flying. Then I guess Angel is coming out of retirement. The Desert Rose Diner reopened the following morning with new gas lines and a lingering smell of industrial cleaning supplies. Jessica moved through her shift with mechanical precision, her mind still reeling from the previous night's conversation with General Hayes. Every customer seemed to look at her differently, though she knew it was just her imagination. The breakfast crowd was lighter than usual, giving Jessica time to process what she had agreed to do. In 72 hours, she would be back in a cockpit for the first time since the accident. The thought made her hands shake as she poured coffee. You're distracted today, Maggie observed, watching Jessica nearly overflow a customer's cup. Everything all right, love? Just tired. Jessica forced a smile. Long night. The bell above the door chimed, and Jessica's stomach dropped as Colonel Stevens entered with his usual entourage. He surveyed the diner with his characteristic disdain before selecting a booth near the window. Wonderful, Jessica muttered under her breath. Stevens had apparently decided that yesterday's incident required follow-up humiliation. As Jessica approached with menus, he was already launching into a loud conversation designed to be overheard. I'm telling you, Major, The decline in civilian work ethic is appalling, Stevens announced. Yesterday, some clumsy waitress nearly ruined my uniform. These people have no concept of proper service or respect for military personnel. Jessica set down the menus without comment, but Stevens wasn't finished. Of course, what can you expect from someone whose greatest achievement is serving coffee? Some people are simply born to serve their betters. From across the diner, Williams watched the interaction with growing anger. He had spent the night researching everything he could find about Angel's service record, and what he had discovered made Stevens's behavior even more infuriating. "Your usual coffee, sir?" Jessica asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Make sure it's hot this time, and try not to spill it. I have important meetings today with real military personnel." As Jessica turned to leave, Stevens grabbed her wrist. "And next time, show some proper respect when addressing a superior officer. Let go of me." Jessica's voice carried a warning that Stevens was too arrogant to recognize. "I'll let go when you learn your place. You're nothing but a—" "That's enough." The voice came from Lieutenant Martinez, who had just entered with several other young pilots from Nellis. She strode directly to Stevens' table, her flight suit crisp and her expression furious. "Excuse me, Lieutenant, but this is a private conversation," Stevens said dismissively. "No, sir, this is harassment." Martinez positioned herself between Stevens and Jessica. "And you're harassing someone who deserves a hell of a lot more respect than you're showing." Stevens stood, using his height to intimidate the younger officer. "How dare you speak to a superior officer that way? Do you know who I am?" "I know exactly who you are, Colonel. You're Richard Stevens, Logistics Coordinator, Pentagon Desk Assignment, 0 combat missions." Martinez's voice carried across the now silent diner. "And do you know who you've been insulting?" Jessica tried to step away, but Martinez continued. "This is Lieutenant Colonel Jessica Thompson, call sign Angel, 23 combat missions, Distinguished Flying Cross, Silver Star, and more confirmed saves than any pilot in recent history." The diner erupted in whispers. Stevens' face went white as he processed what he had just heard. "That's impossible. Angel is—" "Standing right in front of you," William said, rising from his booth. "The pilot who saved my nephew's unit in Syria. The woman whose wingman died protecting civilians while she completed an impossible mission." Stevens looked around the diner, seeing the faces of other customers, many of them veterans, staring at him with undisguised disgust. His companions, the major and captain, had backed away from their table, clearly wanting no part of what was unfolding. I didn't know," Stevens stammered. "No, you didn't," Jessica said quietly, finally speaking. "You saw a waitress and assumed that was all I could ever be. You saw someone in civilian clothes and decided they were beneath you." Jessica reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small leather case. She opened it to reveal her military decorations, medals that Stevens recognized but had never earned himself. "I've flown missions you couldn't imagine, Colonel. I've made decisions that saved thousands of lives. And yes, I've also served coffee and cleaned tables, because that's what I needed to do to survive." The silence in the diner was absolute. Stevens stared at the medals, his face cycling through embarrassment, disbelief, and something that might have been shame. "But here's the difference between us," Jessica continued. "I've never used my service record to make someone else feel small. I've never treated another human being as less than myself because of their job or their circumstances." Martinez stepped forward. "Colonel Stevens, I think you owe Lieutenant Colonel Thompson an apology." Stevens looked around the diner again, seeing the expectant faces, the veterans who were waiting for his response. His career flashed before his eyes, the reports that would be filed, the questions that would be asked about his conduct. "I apologize, Lieutenant Colonel. I was out of line." Jessica nodded curtly. "Apology accepted. Now, did you want that coffee or not?" The tension broke as several customers chuckled. Stevens mumbled something about being late for a meeting and hurried out with his companions, leaving money on the table. As the normal sounds of the diner resumed, Martinez approached Jessica. "Ma'am, I hope I didn't overstep, but I couldn't stand watching him treat you that way." "You did fine, Lieutenant." Jessica studied the young pilot. "How did you know who I was?" "Sergeant Williams told us last night. Ma'am, you're the reason I became a pilot. Your mission reports are required reading in flight school." Jessica felt a familiar tightness in her chest. "Those reports don't tell the whole story." "No, ma'am. But they tell enough." Martinez hesitated. "Ma'am, is it true? Are you coming back?" Jessica looked around the diner, at Maggie beaming with pride, at Williams nodding encouragingly, at the other customers who were looking at her with newfound respect. "Yes, Lieutenant. Angel is coming back. For the first time in 2 years." Saying those words didn't feel like a lie. The gates of Nellis Air Force Base loomed ahead as Jessica sat in the passenger seat of General Hayes's staff car. 48 hours had passed since she accepted the mission, and every mile closer to the base made her heart race faster. The familiar sight of F-22 Raptors on the flight line sent waves of nausea through her stomach. "You don't have to do this alone," Dr. Mitchell said from the seat beside her. Hayes had insisted on bringing Jessica's therapist as part of the mission preparation team. "Remember the breathing techniques we practiced?" Jessica nodded, focusing on slow, controlled breaths as they passed through security. The guards snapped to attention when they recognized General Hayes, but their eyes lingered curiously on the woman in civilian clothes beside her. The base looked exactly as Jessica remembered: sprawling hangars, precision-maintained aircraft, and the constant background hum of military efficiency. But now it felt alien, like visiting a place from someone else's life. "Your quarters are in the VIP section," Hayes explained as they drove past rows of enlisted housing. "Complete privacy, medical support on standby. We've also arranged for Sergeant Williams to be part of your preparation team." "Williams requested the assignment," Dr. Mitchell added. "He wants to help." They pulled up to a nondescript building near the flight line. Inside, Jessica was surprised to find a fully equipped medical facility alongside what appeared to be a pilot-ready room. Williams stood at attention as they entered, his expression mixing respect with genuine concern. "Ma'am," he said formally. "Welcome back." "Thank you, Sergeant, though I'm not sure 'back' is the right word." Hayes gestured toward a conference table covered with mission briefings, medical charts, and psychological evaluation forms. "We have 3 days to get you mission ready. That means physical conditioning, psychological preparation, and tactical briefings." Dr. Mitchell opened a thick folder. "Jessica, your last evaluation showed significant improvement in managing PTSD symptoms, but flying combat missions will trigger responses we haven't dealt with in therapy." "What kind of responses?" Williams asked. "Flashbacks during high-stress maneuvers, panic attacks during weapon systems activation, disorientation when hearing radio chatter similar to that night." Dr. Mitchell's voice was clinical but compassionate. "We need to prepare for all of these scenarios." Jessica stared at the mission photos spread across the table, satellite images of the Syrian compound, flight path analyses, target identification charts. The familiar surge of tactical thinking began to override her anxiety. "The approach vector is similar to the mission where Hawk died," she said quietly, tracing a finger along the planned route. "That's not a coincidence," Hayes admitted. "The terrain, the defensive positions, even the civilian proximity factors are nearly identical. That's why we need you specifically. And why this will be the hardest thing you've ever done," Dr. Mitchell added. Williams studied the flight plans with his maintenance expertise. "Ma'am, these are some serious modifications to the standard F-22 configuration: enhanced electronic warfare suite, extended range fuel tanks, specialized ordnance packages." "The aircraft is being prepared as we speak," Hayes said. "But first we need to see if you can handle being in a cockpit again." Through the window, Jessica could see the flight line where a lone F-22 sat in a maintenance hangar, its sleek form both beautiful and terrifying. Just looking at it made her hands tremble. "I want to try the simulator first," she said, "before I get near the real thing." "Already arranged," Dr. Mitchell replied. "We'll start with basic flight operations, then gradually introduce combat scenarios. If you experience panic attacks, we stop immediately." Hayes checked her watch. "Lieutenant Martinez is standing by to assist with the simulation runs. She volunteered when she heard you were coming back. She's a good pilot," Williams added. "Reminds me of you at that age, fearless and determined." Jessica almost smiled. "I was never fearless. I was just too stubborn to quit." "That stubbornness might be what saves those civilians," Hayes said seriously. As they prepared to move to the simulation facility, Jessica caught sight of her reflection in the window. For the first time in 2 years, she was wearing a flight suit again. The woman looking back at her seemed like a stranger, older, scarred, but somehow more real than the waitress who had served coffee just days before. "Ready, Angel?" Dr. Mitchell asked gently. Jessica took a deep breath, hearing Hawk's voice in her memory. "Angels don't quit, Jess, they just find new ways to fly." "Ready as I'll ever be." The flight simulator hummed to life around Jessica, its cockpit an exact replica of the F-22 she would fly in 36 hours. Every switch, every display, every control surface felt achingly familiar beneath her hands. Dr. Mitchell monitored her vital signs from the control room, while Lieutenant Martinez provided radio support. "Angel, this is Tower. You're cleared for takeoff, runway 27. Martinez's voice crackled through the headset. Jessica's hands froze on the throttles. The voice was different, but the cadence, the professional calm, it was exactly like the night Hawk died. "Jessica?" Dr. Mitchell's voice cut through the simulation. "Heart rate is spiking. Do you need to stop?" "No." Jessica forced her breathing to steady. "Continue the exercise." She pushed the throttles forward, feeling the simulated G-forces as the virtual aircraft accelerated down the runway. The takeoff was smooth, muscle memory guiding her through procedures she had performed hundreds of times. "Looking good, Angel," Martinez encouraged, climbing to flight level 300. For 20 minutes, Jessica flew basic maneuvers without incident. Banking turns, altitude changes, navigation waypoints, all felt natural, almost therapeutic. But then Hayes' voice came through the intercom. "Angel, we're introducing the combat scenario now. Multiple bogies inbound, civilian convoy in the target area." The simulator's displays suddenly filled with threat indicators. Red diamonds appeared on her radar scope, representing enemy aircraft. Below, a convoy of vehicles moved through a mountain pass, exactly like the night Hawk died. "Angel, this is Hawk," came a recorded voice that made Jessica's blood freeze. It was Mike Rodriguez, his actual radio transmissions from their final mission, carefully edited for the simulation. "No," Jessica whispered, her hands beginning to shake. "Turn it off." "Jessica, stay with us," Dr. Mitchell urged. "Remember your breathing techniques." But Jessica was no longer in the simulator. She was back in Syrian airspace, watching tracer rounds reach toward her wingman's aircraft. The cockpit felt smaller, the air thinner. Her vision began to tunnel. "Angel, we've got multiple bogies inbound," Hawk's voice continued from the speakers. "Stay with me, partner." "I can't." Jessica yanked off her helmet, her breathing rapid and shallow. "I can't do this." The simulation froze as Dr. Mitchell and Martinez rushed into the cockpit. Jessica was hyperventilating, tears streaming down her face. "It's okay," Dr. Mitchell said calmly. "You're safe. You're at Nellis, not in Syria." "He's dead because of me," Jessica sobbed. "I should have been faster, should have seen the second launcher. Jessica, look at me." Dr. Mitchell gripped her shoulders. "What happened to Mike was not your fault. You know this." Martinez knelt beside the simulator. "Ma'am, I've read the mission reports. Captain Rodriguez made his choice. He saved 200 civilians that night. But I was supposed to protect him, and he was supposed to protect those families," Martinez said firmly. "He did his job. Now you need to do yours." General Hayes entered the simulation bay, her expression grim. "How bad is it?" "She's experiencing severe trauma response to audio triggers," Dr. Mitchell explained. "Hearing Mike's voice, similar tactical situations, it's bringing everything back." Hayes checked her watch. "We launch in 34 hours. Can she fly or not?" "I don't know," Dr. Mitchell admitted. Jessica wiped her eyes, anger beginning to replace fear. "Don't talk about me like I'm not here." "Then tell us," Hayes said bluntly. "Can you complete this mission?" Jessica stared at the frozen simulation display, seeing the red threat indicators, the convoy of innocent civilians. In her mind, she could hear other voices. Tommy Chen asking about his father, Mrs. Chen crying in the kitchen, Martinez talking about the base elementary school. "General, I need to know something," Jessica said slowly. "The mission where Hawk died, what really happened? Not the sanitized version in the reports. The truth." Hayes and Dr. Mitchell exchanged glances. "Jessica, that's classified. I'm about to fly a mission that might kill me. I deserve to know what went wrong last time." Hayes was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. "The intelligence was compromised. Someone leaked our flight plans to the enemy. That's why they were ready for you, why they had more surface-to-air missiles than expected." Jessica felt the blood drain from her face. "You're saying we were set up?" "The investigation concluded that a Syrian intelligence asset had infiltrated our planning committee. Mike died because someone betrayed your mission." The revelation hit Jessica like a physical blow. For 2 years, she had blamed herself for not being fast enough, skilled enough. perfect enough. But the truth was that they had been walking into a trap from the moment they took off. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because we needed you to focus on recovery, not revenge, Dr. Mitchell said gently. Jessica stood slowly, her legs unsteady. And this mission? How do I know the same thing won't happen again? Because this time, only 4 people know the complete flight plan, Hayes said. Me, you, the mission commander, and the President of the United States. Martinez stepped forward. Ma'am, if it helps, I'd be honored to fly as your wingman. Jessica looked at the young pilot, so eager, so confident, so much like Mike had been. No, I fly alone. Jessica, Hayes began. I said no. Jessica's voice echoed through the simulation bay. I won't be responsible for another pilot's death. If this mission fails, it fails because of me, not because I couldn't protect someone else. She turned back to the simulator, her jaw set with determination. Run the scenario again. And this time, don't stop no matter what I say. Doctor. Mitchell looked concerned. Jessica, you're not ready. Those families at Nellis are counting on me. Tommy Chen is counting on me. Jessica climbed back into the cockpit. Hawk died protecting innocents. The least I can do is try to do the same. As the simulation powered up again, Jessica heard Hawk's voice one more time. Angels don't quit, Jess. They just find new ways to fly. This time, she was ready to listen. Mission day, 04:30 hours. The pre-dawn darkness at Nellis Air Force Base was broken only by the harsh glare of floodlights illuminating the flight line. Jessica stood before her F-22 Raptor, its stealth coating gleaming like polished obsidian. The aircraft had been modified extensively, extended fuel tanks, enhanced electronic warfare systems, and a payload specifically designed for precision strikes against hardened targets. Final systems check complete, ma'am, Williams reported, his voice tight with emotion. She's ready to fly. Jessica nodded, running her hand along the fuselage. Someone had painted a small angel wing insignia near the cockpit, along with the words, "For Hawk," in elegant script. Who authorized this? She asked. I did, General Hayes said, approaching with Dr. Mitchell. Every angel needs her wings. The pre-flight briefing had been thorough, but sobering. Intelligence confirmed that the terrorist compound was preparing to deploy their chemical weapons within hours. The window for intervention was closing rapidly. Remember, Dr. Mitchell said quietly, if you experience flashbacks during the mission, focus on your breathing and the present moment. You're not flying into the past, you're flying toward the future. Jessica pulled on her helmet, the familiar weight both comforting and terrifying. I know what I have to do. Lieutenant Martinez approached, carrying a small package. Ma'am, this is from Tommy Chen. He wanted you to have it. Inside was a child's drawing of an angel with fighter jet wings, protecting a group of stick-figure families. At the bottom, in crayon letters, Tommy had written, "Thank you for keeping us safe." Jessica's eyes misted as she tucked the drawing into her flight suit pocket. Tell him I'll bring it back. So 5:30 hours. Takeoff. The F-22's engines spooled up with a sound like controlled thunder. Jessica felt the familiar surge of power as she released the brakes and accelerated down the runway. For the first time in 2 years, she was where she belonged. Angel is airborne, she reported, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Copy, Angel. Good hunting, Hayes responded from the command center. The flight to Syrian airspace took 3 hours, with 2 aerial refueling stops. As Jessica approached the target area, the mountainous terrain below looked exactly like her nightmares. Jagged peaks casting long shadows, narrow valleys that could hide surface-to-air missiles. Angel, this is command. Target is confirmed active. Multiple heat signatures in the compound. You are cleared to engage. Jessica descended to low altitude, using the terrain to mask her approach. The compound appeared on her targeting display, a cluster of buildings surrounded by defensive positions. Intelligence had been correct about the civilian population nearby. She could see a small village less than 2 miles away. Beginning attack run, Jessica reported. As she lined up for the strike, her radio crackled with static. For a moment, she could swear she heard Hawk's voice. Stay with me, partner. But this time, instead of panic, Jessica felt a strange sense of peace. I'm with you, Mike, she whispered. The first missile struck the main laboratory building with surgical precision, the explosion contained within the reinforced structure. Secondary explosions followed as the chemical weapons stockpile was neutralized. Jessica banked hard to avoid debris, her aircraft dancing through the mountain passes with deadly grace. "Direct hit on primary target," she reported. "Chemical threat neutralized." But as she climbed away from the target area, her threat warning system screamed. Multiple surface-to-air missiles were tracking her, just like that night 2 years ago. "Angel, you have multiple SAMs inbound." Command's voice was urgent. Jessica didn't panic. Instead, she heard Dr. Mitchell's voice. Focus on the present moment. She was not the broken pilot who had crashed in these mountains. She was Angel, and she had a job to finish. The first missile passed harmlessly below as Jessica executed a vertical climb that pushed her aircraft to its limits. The second missile detonated close enough to rattle her teeth, but the F-22's stealth technology and her evasive maneuvers kept her alive. "Angel, what's your status?" Command called. "Still flying," Jessica replied, and for the first time in years, she was smiling. The flight home was uneventful, but as Jessica approached Nellis, she could see crowds gathered on the flight line. Word of the mission's success had spread throughout the base. As her aircraft touched down, Jessica felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she had carried for 2 long years. She had faced her demons and emerged victorious, not just against the enemy, but against the guilt and fear that had nearly destroyed her. The canopy opened, and Jessica climbed out to find General Hayes, Dr. Mitchell, Williams, Martinez, and dozens of other personnel waiting. But the face that mattered most was Tommy Chen's, standing beside his grandmother with tears of joy in his eyes. "Welcome home, Angel," Hayes said, her voice thick with emotion. Jessica removed her helmet, her hair catching the morning sunlight. "It's good to be back, General. It's good to be back." As the crowd cheered, Jessica looked up at the clear Nevada sky and whispered, "We did it, Hawk. We kept them safe." Somewhere in the distance, she could swear she heard Mike Rodriguez laughing with approval. Nellis Air Force Base, 2032. The morning sun cast long shadows across the flight line as Colonel Jessica Angel Thompson walked toward the newest addition to the base, the Captain Miguel Hawk Rodriguez Memorial Flight Training Center. The building's gleaming facade bore the inscription, "In memory of those who gave their lives so others might live." 7 years had passed since that mission over Syria, and Jessica's life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined. The nightmares still came occasionally, but they no longer controlled her. Dr. Mitchell's therapy, combined with her return to purpose, had given her back her life. "Colonel Thompson?" a young voice called out behind her. Jessica turned to see Cadet Tommy Chen, now 15 and enrolled in the Air Force Academy preparatory program. The boy who had once drawn pictures of angels with fighter jet wings was now preparing to become a pilot himself, following in his father's footsteps. "Hello, Tommy. Ready for your first simulator session?" "Yes, ma'am." His enthusiasm reminded Jessica of herself at that age, eager, determined, and completely unaware of the challenges ahead. Inside the training center, Jessica found Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Martinez briefing a group of new pilot candidates. Martinez had been promoted twice since that day 7 years ago, and now served as the center's deputy commander. "And remember," Martinez was saying to her students, "courage isn't the absence of fear. It's flying the mission despite the fear." Jessica smiled, recognizing her own words from a lecture she had given the previous week. The training center had become her life's work, a place where she could pass on the lessons learned from both triumph and tragedy. "Colonel Thompson," one of the cadets raised her hand, "is it true you flew the Syria mission alone?" "It is," Jessica replied. "But I want you to understand something important. I didn't fly alone because I was brave. I flew alone because I was afraid. Afraid of losing another wingman like I lost Captain Rodriguez." The room fell silent as Jessica continued. "That fear nearly cost me everything. It took me 2 years to understand that we don't fly solo to protect others. We fly together because that's how we protect each other." After the briefing, Jessica walked to her office, where a familiar figure waited. Master Sergeant Williams, now the center's senior maintenance chief, stood beside her desk with a knowing smile. "The ceremony committee is ready for your final approval," he said, gesturing to the plans spread across her desk. Tomorrow marked the 7th anniversary of Hawk's death, and the base was dedicating a new memorial garden in his honor. Jessica had been asked to speak at the ceremony, something that would have been impossible for her just a few years ago. "It looks perfect, Tom." She had long since dropped the formal address with Williams, who had become one of her closest friends. "Mike would have loved it." "Speaking of Mike," Williams said carefully, "Maria Rodriguez called this morning. She's flying in for the ceremony. Jessica's breath caught. Mike's widow had remarried 3 years ago and moved to California with her children. They exchanged Christmas cards, but Jessica hadn't seen her face to face since the funeral. How is she? Good. Happy. She wanted me to tell you that she's proud of what you've built here. Through her office window, Jessica could see the Desert Rose Diner in the distance. Maggie O'Brien had retired the previous year, selling the business to Mrs. Chen, who had transformed it into a gathering place for military families. The diner now displayed a small memorial wall honoring local service members, with Mike Rodriguez's photo holding a place of honor. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." To her surprise, General Hayes entered, now wearing the 4 stars of a full general. Behind her walked a man Jessica didn't recognize, tall, distinguished, wearing a suit that screamed, "Washington, D.C." "Jessica, I'd like you to meet Deputy Secretary of Defense Morrison." Morrison stepped forward with an outstretched hand. "Colonel Thompson, it's an honor. I've heard remarkable things about your work here." "Thank you, sir." Hayes smiled. "The Secretary has a proposition for you. The Pentagon wants to expand the Rodriguez Training Center model to other bases. They're offering you a promotion to Brigadier General and command of the entire program." Jessica stared at them, processing the magnitude of what they were offering. It was everything she had once dreamed of: flag rank, national responsibility, the chance to shape the future of military aviation. That's incredible," she said slowly. "But I need to ask, would I still be able to fly?" Morrison nodded. "The position includes maintaining flight status. We need someone who understands both the technical and human aspects of pilot training." Jessica walked to her window, looking out at the flight line where young pilots were practicing touch-and-go landings. Some of them would face combat, and some might not come home. But because of the training they received here, more of them would survive, and more civilians would be protected. "I accept," she said, turning back to face them. "But I have one condition." "Name it," Morrison replied. "The program keeps Mike's name. Every facility, every graduation ceremony, every memorial service, his sacrifice gets remembered." "Done." As Hayes and Morrison left to finalize the paperwork, Jessica remained at her window. The afternoon sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere in that vast expanse, she knew Mike was watching, proud of what she had become. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Tommy Chen. "Colonel Thompson, I passed my physical fitness test, one step closer to earning my wings." Jessica smiled, typing back, "Your father would be proud. Keep flying high." 7 years ago, she had been a broken waitress hiding from her past. Today she was a colonel about to become a general, responsible for training the next generation of pilots. The journey had been painful, marked by loss and struggle, but it had led her exactly where she needed to be. As the last light faded from the sky, Jessica whispered the words that had become her daily prayer. "Thank you, Mike, for showing me that angels don't quit. They just find new ways to fly." Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, and new opportunities to honor the fallen by protecting the living. But tonight, for the first time in 7 years, Jessica Thompson was completely at peace with who she had become. The angel had found her wings again. As we reach the end of Angel's extraordinary journey, we witness the profound truth that heroism isn't measured by the absence of fear, but by the courage to act despite it. Jessica Thompson's story reminds us that our greatest failures can become the foundation for our most meaningful victories. From the depths of trauma and self-doubt, Jessica discovered that true strength lies not in perfection, but in the willingness to rise again after falling. Her transformation from a broken waitress hiding from her past to a general shaping the future of military aviation proves that redemption is always possible for those brave enough to face their demons. The legacy of Captain Miguel "Hawk" Rodriguez lives on through every pilot trained at the center bearing his name, every civilian protected by their skills, and every life saved by the courage he inspired in others. His sacrifice wasn't just about one moment of heroism. It was about creating a ripple effect of hope that continues to spread across generations. Jessica's story teaches us that we all have the capacity to be angels in someone else's life. Whether we're serving coffee in a diner, maintaining aircraft on a flight line, or leading others through impossible missions, every act of service matters. Every moment of compassion counts. Every choice to help rather than harm makes the world a little brighter. The young pilots who now train under Jessica's guidance carry forward not just technical skills, but the understanding that their true mission is to protect those who cannot protect themselves. They learn that being a warrior means being a guardian, and that the greatest victories are measured not in enemies defeated, but in innocence saved. Your thoughts matter to us. This story was crafted to honor the real-life heroes who serve in our military, the pilots who risk everything for strangers, the support personnel who keep them flying, and the families who sacrifice alongside them. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone you know who has served, or if it inspired you to think differently about courage and redemption, we'd love to hear from you. Share in the comments where you're watching from, and tell us about a moment when someone was an angel in your life. And here's something special for those who made it to the very end. Comment the word wings below. This helps us know who experienced Jessica's complete journey and supports our mission to bring more inspiring military stories to audiences who appreciate the sacrifices made for our freedom. Ready for more heart-pounding military dramas? Check out the stories featured in our recommendation cards. Tales of Navy SEALs facing impossible odds, Army Rangers on dangerous rescue missions, and Marine pilots pushing the limits of courage. Each story honors the men and women who serve, celebrating their humanity while showcasing their heroism. Remember, heroes aren't born. They're forged in the crucible of choice. Every day, we all face moments where we can choose to be someone's angel. The question isn't whether you have wings, it's whether you're brave enough to use them. Thank you for flying with Angel. Thank you for honoring our heroes. And thank you for believing that even in our darkest moments, we can still find the courage to soar. Fly high, serve others. Never forget that courage is contagious. What did you think of Angel's journey? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to comment wings if you made it to the end.